Hello, thanks for joining us. We are live in my office, and what we're going to do in our live session today is we are going to show how we derive a supply curve from our, I would say, our cost fundamentals. Professor Fernando is going to show us that. I am going to talk about consumer and producer surplus and show what happens if we include an externality in a market. And Professor Jose is going to show us what happens in a market when we impose a tariff. And we are going to calculate the welfare losses of tariffs. So, there's laughing over there. Without further
laughing with you, Karen.
Laughing with me. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Professor Fernando and
hi, how's it going?
let him derive a supply curve.
So that's the name of the game here, to derive a supply curve. Okay, I'll show you how to do it in a graph. So let's say you're producing some good. Let's say it's, what was it, washing machines?
Yes, washing.
All right, so we're going to produce washing machines. The amount produced is going to be Q, and it will be a function of 3 inputs. The first one we're going to call, let's say it's the plant, the structure, the structure within which you produce the washing machines. Let's call that QT. The second one will be labor. Let's call that QL, the amount of labor that you use in order to produce the washing machines. And the third one, let's say those are the washing machine parts. So the amount of parts that you need, let's call it QK. So these are all quantities. Quantities of inputs, some function. I won't use some functional form. I'll make it simple. We're just going to do a graph. When used together, produce a certain amount of output. All right. Now let's assume that you have one plant. So that means that QT equals 1. All right. And you're trying to decide how much labor and how many parts to use. It's not the best example, but let's assume that you can draw from what we know from production functions. You can draw isoquants. Let's make these isoquants something like this. All right, and I'm going to try to keep the example as simple as possible. Let's say that this is the quantity of labor that you use, and this is the quantity of capital. And if you use 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of capital, you get to produce 1 washing machine. But if you use, let's say, 3 and 3, put it up here. What's it, 3 and 3? No, let's say this is 1 and 2. I want my example to work. 3 and 6. You can produce 2. And I'm going to make more isoquants. I'm going to make one way out here. So if you produce using, what is this? Seven, and up here, 14, you get to produce 3 washing machines, right? So the idea is to show you how you can go from a production function like we have here to the cost structure of the firm. Okay, but of course for that you need prices. And so let's say that the price of capital is, what is it going to be? Let's make it 5. price of labor is 10, right? And the price of the plant, again, I'm trying to use simple numbers here, so there's nothing realistic about this, is 40. Okay, so what's the cost structure of the firm? Well, there's a couple of things that you can test. Notice that if, I haven't said anything about the returns to scale of this production function because I haven't mentioned what the production function is, but you can see how if you double the capital and labor to 2 and 4, you don't quite get twice the output. So when it comes to doubling labor and capital, you can't get twice the output by doubling the capital and labor. So that's going to have an impact on the cost structure of this firm. But let's continue. All right. So given these prices, one thing that you can do, which we learned, I think it was in week 4, is you can create cost lines. So all combinations of inputs that cost the firm the same amount. So to give you an example, how much?
I think we called them ISO costs.
ISO cost lines. Thank you. Thanks. So let's say you want to spend, I don't know, $60. Okay. Well, that has to equal the price of capital. So let me write in terms of the symbols first, times the quantity of capital that you have, plus the price of labor times the quantity of labor that you have, plus the price of the plant times the quantity of plants that you have. So this would be your total input cost. And while we know certain things about this, for example, we know that this is 5. We're not sure how much capital we're going to use. We know that this is 10. We're not sure how much labor we're going to use. And we know that this is 40 and this is 1, right? And so we have to come up with quantities of capital and labor that cost us $60. And I can show you very quickly so that I don't make this example too long, that if your capital, for example, is 2 and your labor is 1, then this is $10 plus $10 20 plus 40, 60. So this combination costs the firm $60. But there are other combinations. If you make capital 0, then you can make labor 2, and that will also cost the firm $60. Or you can make labor 0 and capital, what would it be, 4, and that would also cost $60. And in the end, what you notice is that all these combinations of capital and labor cost the firm $60, and that's why you form this ISO cost line. And you can do more, right? You can spend twice as much. 0.4 to 0.8 would spend $120, or 2 and 0 to 4 and 0 would spend $120 as well. And so if you want to spend twice as much money, well, sorry, it's not twice as much. I'm sorry, that's not correct. I'll take it back. You're spending twice as much on capital and labor. So instead of spending 10 and 10, 20, you would be spending 40 plus the 40, 80. So this would be $80. Right? You can correct me if I'm doing this wrong.
No, that looks good. So
Okay.
The reason that we're not changing, can you explain to me why we're not changing 40?
Oh, because the quantity of plants remains the same. And so this stays fixed no matter what value of QL and what value of QK we use. And because it remains fixed, it should give you an idea of what this is going to end up being within the cost structure of the firm. This doesn't change. Doesn't matter how much you end up producing, this is not going to change. I want to think about that, but we'll get back to it. All right, so now what we have to do is we have to decide how much, if we're going to produce one washing machine, what combination of labor and capital do we want to use? So notice that, and this, I'm doing this graphically, this combination of labor and capital produces one washing machine because it's on the isoquant that produces one washing machine. But it costs $80. So why would you spend $80 on producing one washing machine when you can choose this combination that costs $60 and also produces one washing machine because it's on the same isoquant? And so what you're trying to do, if you draw a bunch of these iso-cost lines, they're all going to be parallel because the prices of capital and labor don't change, just the quantities, is to get on the lowest possible cost line while staying on the same isoquant. And so what we learned is that, and this is what we learned in week 4 or week 5, I don't remember, is that the best combination that you can choose in order to produce one washing machine is a quantity of capital of 2, let's start with labor, a quantity of labor of 1, quantity of capital of 2. You have that one plant, so that's not going to change, which costs the firm, so total cost, what did we say? $60. Right? So we have established a relationship between the quantity of output and the total cost of that output after choosing our inputs optimally. All right? And so we can do this again, not just for 1 unit of output, but for 2 units of output. And what we'll find, and I'll just tell you what the answer is that if it's the best possible combination, which is when you have a tangency between the isoquant and the cost line, is 3 and 6. So if that's your best possible combination, let's write it here. You're going to use 3 units of labor, 6 units of capital. You're still stuck at 1 plant. Then how much is that going to cost you? Well, how much is that going to cost you? 3 times 10, 30. 5 times 6, 30. 30 plus 30, 60. Plus 40, 100. So now we're spending $100 to produce 2 washing machines. And I'll do one more, just to complete things. Let's say that to produce 3 units, or 3 washing machines, you have to, or you want to, and it's not that you have to, you want to pick this combination because, again, if you were to pick a different combination, it would cost you more. Notice that this cost line is above this one. You want to pick the lowest possible cost line that produces those 3 units. And this one uses 7 and 14. Yikes. Those are bad numbers, but doesn't matter. So if this is, what was it, 7, that would be 70
14
plus 70 again, right? 14 plus 5 times 5. So that's 140, 180. So now we're spending $180 on 3 washing machines. And what combination of inputs are we using? 7, 14, and again, stuck at 1 plant. And if we wanted to produce 0, then we would pick 0 and 0, obviously, but we would still be stuck at 1 plant. So we still have to pay this $40. Those would be unavoidable. All right. Okay, so now we have a little table and we can start thinking about, well, what is the cost of producing 1 washing machine? What is the cost of producing the 2nd washing machine? What is the cost of producing the 3rd washing machine? Well, that is what we call the marginal cost. And notice that you're gonna pay 40 regardless. Right? So the marginal cost of producing the 1st unit is the extra cost from going from 0 units produced to 1 unit produced. And that extra cost is $20. The extra cost from producing that 2nd washing machine is 100 minus 60, 40. And the extra cost from producing the 3rd one is 180 minus 100, 80. So there you have your marginal cost. And then the other cost, cost curve that we're interested in is the average cost, because it's going to be helpful. What is the average cost of producing washing machines? Well, You can't average over zero, so there's no such thing as the average cost of producing zero. But the average cost, or the average total cost, I think we called it, of producing one washing machine is $60 because you're only producing one. But now that you're producing two at a total cost of 100, it's costing you 50 per washing machine. That's the average. And if you're producing three at a cost of 180, it's costing you 180 over 3, $60 on average, or $60 per washing machine. And there you have a nice table representing the cost structure of the firm, which could then lead you to want to graph this. And the graph, I'll put it up here. It's the last thing I'll do. Well, is it? No, because you wanted supply curves, right?
Well, but we're getting pretty close now, aren't we?
Yes, we are extremely close. We can graph as a function of the quantity produced what the marginal cost and the average costs are. And so notice that this goes from 20 to 40 to 80 when your production goes from 1 to 2 to 3. So this would be, let's say, 20, 40, and 80. And so you go from 20 to 40 to 80. And so you can see how this marginal cost is increasing. You have increasing marginal cost. It gets more and more expensive to produce the next washing machine. What about the average? Well, the average has this particular property that it was 60 when you were producing one, then it went down to 50, and then it went back up to 60. And so we can mark that 60, 50, and then back to 60. So let me do it in red. The average cost is going to look something like this.
And we called it ATC.
Oh, ATC. Let me use the right notation. It's very important. So the average total cost is given by this curve right here. And so a couple of things that we can learn is that the minimum average cost occurs where this crosses the marginal cost. Why is that? Because think about it. If the cost of producing the next unit is below the average so far, it's going to drag the average down. The cost of producing the next unit is above the average so far, it's going to pull it up. So when they're both the same is when you're at a minimum average cost. Right?
And that looks like it happens somewhere between 2 and 3, right? We can't.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 2 and 3. The numbers are not great.
Or somewhere between 1 and 2, actually.
It could also be somewhere yes. I guess it has to be between 2 and 3 because this is yeah.
Oh yeah.
This is too low. So it has to be between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Somewhere between 2. Right? And one more thing. There's also another one, which is the variable cost. And you might be interested in knowing what the average variable cost is. And the average variable cost is the total cost net of the fixed cost. So what is the variable cost of not producing anything? Well, it's 0. The variable cost at 60 is 20. It's going to be the marginal cost. Well, no, it's not. This is going to be 60 because it's 100 minus 40, and this is going to be 140. That's your average variable cost. And so you can look at the average variable cost, and you can graph it as well if you want to. What is it going to look like? It's going to look something like this. Let's graph it. 60. Oh, I forgot to divide. Yeah, this is the total variable cost. You want to divide by the number of units produced. So this is 30. Sorry. And this is 140 divided by 3.
That's about 4 and a bit.
40 something, right? 45.
40, yeah.
47 point or 46.
Yeah.
Let's make it 46.
20, yeah. 4 and a bit.
But in any case, the average variable cost is going to look something like this. it's going to be underneath the marginal cost because it's coming down from 0. They're going to be equal here, but just because we're using full numbers and we're not using fractions. And so there you have it. And so then the next question that you might want to ask, the last one, and I promise that this finishes the exercise, is if you're a competitive firm, then how much would you want to produce? Well, remember that if you're a competitive firm, in a market structure of perfect competition, you don't get to pick the price. The market chooses the price. And so your answer of how much should I produce will depend on what the market price is. And we have this rule from perfect competition that says that a perfect competitor always wants to produce Q such that price, which the firm cannot choose, equals marginal cost. But the marginal cost depends on how much you produce. Notice that it's 20 here, it was 40 here, and it was 80 here. So you can choose how much to produce in order to make this rule work, this optimization rule work. And so, knowing that, I can give you a couple of prices. What if the price of these washing machines is $80? How many washing machines should this firm produce? What if the price of washing machines is $40? How many should this firm produce? What if it's 20? And you can answer that question by looking at fixing the price at 20 and seeing that price equals marginal cost if the firm produces 1. So at 20, the optimal amount produced is 1. At 40, the optimal amount produced is 2. And at 80, the optimal amount produced is 3. And so the marginal cost curve turns into the supply curve. This is the firm's supply curve. All right. And since marginal cost is always above average variable cost, you don't have to worry about not covering your variable cost. And so this is your supply curve. All right.
All right, perfect.
That's it.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work off of Professor Fernando's supply curve for one single firm, and then I'm going to think about what that might look like if we have lots and lots of firms in this market. I'm going to introduce a market demand curve. I'm going to show you equilibrium, and I'm going to calculate consumer and producer surplus. And I'm going to make Professor Fernando and Professor Jose talk to me just to keep me on my toes.
Very well.
And to keep me from getting in full-on lecture mode here. Okay, so we got a single firm that is producing washing machines, and we have quantity and costs up here. Now, the reason I chose washing machines today is twofold. One, we're going to talk about tariffs later on, and there's recently been a tariff that has been imposed on washing machines. And second, I'm buying a washing machine this week. So I know approximately what the market price of a washing machine happens to be right now.
Definitely not $80.
It is not $80. It is in the neighborhood. You know, you can spend as much as you really kind of want to on a washing machine, but if we're thinking about your ordinary garden variety washing machine, you might end up spending anywhere from $800 to $1,200. So we're gonna think about that. That's fine. We could have written it down this way. This marginal cost curve just keeps going
up. So yeah.
And we're going to change the nature of what we're looking at here, because this is for a single, a very small single firm in a perfectly competitive market. Another thing to recognize is the washing machine market is more monopolistically competitive than perfectly competitive. But that's okay. We're gonna treat it like it's perfectly competitive. There are probably enough producers that
there's enough competition.
Not enough competition in this market that it's close enough. So, and we're gonna say quantity, and this could be millions or hundreds of thousands sold in a year. It's a big market. And here's price. And I'm going to draw a supply curve. And what this supply curve that I'm drawing represents is all of the marginal cost curves of all of the firms that produce washing machines added up. And I'm going to make it nice and straight, even though you might see pictures of supply curves that look different than this.
Just easier.
Just easier. And this supply curve, this is going to be equal to all marginal cost curves of all of the producers. And I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to say if the price is below $300, then this market just doesn't exist. Everyone exits this market and we don't have any washing machines. So when Professor Fernando was talking about how a perfectly competitive firm takes a price as given, we've added up a lot of marginal cost curves to get here. But where does that price come from? The price comes from the consumer choice problem that we did in the first half of this class. We're going to have a budget constraint. I have a fixed amount of income that I can spend on washing machines and absolutely everything else. I trade off prices of absolutely everything else in washing machines. I really want a washing machine, but what are my other options? What could I do instead of have a washing machine?
Go on a nice trip.
I could go on a nice trip. Yeah.
But then you have to wash everything by hand.
Either I have to wash everything by hand, maybe I need to visit a commercial laundromat. Right, so I have other options. I don't have to have a washing machine. And let's say that if the price of a washing machine, let's see, I'm going to make these dashes here. Here's 300, 600, 900, 1200, 1500, 1800. Am I off?
You might be a little.
Okay. Well, let's make these bigger. We need to have this look good. Otherwise, our example stopped working. We need to have nice, even ticks. 300, 600, 900, 1200, 1500, 1800. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say if the price of washing machines is greater than $1,800, consumers just aren't going to buy any, and we're all going to do our wash in commercial laundromats, or we'll hire services or something like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get us to an equilibrium price of $900. Equilibrium price. This is our demand curve. And I'm going to make our equilibrium here. This ends up being 9. So 3, 6, 9. Is that right? Yes. That's what I got.
Yeah, 12.
No. I wanted it to be 12. I wanted it to be 12. Excuse me. So this is 6. This is 3. This is 9. Okay. So here we have market equilibrium. Our market is clearing at 12 million washing machines at a price of about $900 per machine. Now, I'm in the market for a washing machine because I really don't enjoy doing laundry by hand, and I really don't enjoy going to the laundromat. But there are people that either have higher income than me or have different preferences than me, and there are people out there, there are consumers out there that actually would be willing to pay more than $900. And maybe I'm one of those consumers. I may actually get more value from my washing machine than $900. So this is where I always need to ask Professor Fernando's help because he's our resident micro theorist, and he has some thoughts on how we describe surplus. But we got lots. So we got millions. So we got lots and lots and lots of consumers. And over here is a consumer. We've kind of ordered these consumers by how much benefit they get from the washing machine. So over here we have a consumer that values a washing machine at $1,800. So this consumer gets a private benefit of $1,800 out of this washing machine. And so this point right here represents the next consumer that gets almost the same amount of benefit from the washing machine, just a little bit less. And that could come from, difference in preferences or different in income or what have you. So this consumer values the washing machine a little bit less. And as we move along this curve, what this demand curve also represents is the marginal private benefit that consumers get from their consumption of washing machines. And if we were to add them all up, what we would get is this green area right here ends up being the total private benefit consumers get from.
You can think of it as the total private benefit if they didn't have to pay for them.
If just how it's like once you get it home, how you feel about it and how much you love it. So this is our total private benefit. But our consumers don't get this is as if the washing machine were just to appear into my laundry room for free. And we could continue on here and, but we're not looking at this area over here because this area, these people don't get washing machines. These are the people that wash clothes by hand or visit the laundromat. They don't get washing machines because their marginal private benefit ends up being lower than the market price. And so they're better off by not buying them. So this is another important point that we need to make in microeconomics is that, it's not that these people are necessarily hurt. They're just better off spending their money elsewhere. Okay, so this is our total private benefit. But let us think about how much consumers spend. Every single consumer spends the same amount. Every single consumer spends $900 on their washing machines. So this here, is it total private cost, or do we have a name for it?
For now, yes, there's no externalities.
Yes, this is our total private cost. So this is what our consumers pay. This is how much our consumers benefit. And what we have is this little extra area up here, this triangle. This is not a good pen. It's a garbage pen. I get no benefit from that pen. This right here is the difference. This is the surplus. This is like the extra happy that our consumers get from being able to purchase washing machines. If we were to obliterate this market, this is gone. So this is consumer surplus. And because we have values here, we could actually measure the dollar value of our consumer surplus. And so the dollar value of our consumer surplus is the area of this triangle right here. And what we have, this is 900. So this is our area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. So, okay, here's our base, that's 12. Our height is 900 times 1/2. 5,400. And because we have millions, we would times it by a million. 5,400 million. Because this market exists, that's our consumer surplus. Okay, producer surplus is next. So let's erase this mess I've made here. And then let's think about our producers. So Professor Fernando's graph is going to come in handy again, because our firms have, we can look at the quantity that our firms are willing and able to supply at every possible price. But we know that our firms charge, in this, the way we've modeled this market, which is a little different from reality, but our firms are going to charge everybody the same price. So our firm, we've got one firm, and since we're assuming this is perfectly competitive, we got lots of firms. So we've got at least one firm here that would bring one washing machine to market for a price of $300. And if the price were to rise a little, that firm would bring another washing machine to market.
Or maybe another one would bring one.
Or another one would bring one too. We have another firm in the market. So here's the
This is the total.
the total. But all firms charge the same price. All firms charge $900. And so what we're going to do here is we can calculate, let's change it to green for money. We can calculate the total total revenue of the firm. These are the total firms, or their sales. And what we're going to think about is the additional revenue that they get on each unit above and beyond what it was required for them to bring the washing machine to market. So at this low amount here, there's some firms out there that would bring washers to market for $300, but they don't actually have to collect $300. They could get to collect $900. So this is the extra benefit. So here's our total revenue, and here's what our producers get to collect above and beyond what's required to bring it to market. This here is our producer surplus. And since we have dollar values, we can find the dollar value of producer surplus. And we're going to say that's equal to 1/2, this is the area of this triangle. Our base is 12, and our height is 600. So our producer surplus should be 3,600. And since it's in millions, it's 3,600 million. Markets are great because they give consumer surplus, they give producer surplus, and if we wanted to sum up the total surplus or total economic surplus, we would say the surplus that exists because this market exists would be 54 plus 3,600. So total surplus, I don't know if we did it in this class or not, is that
9
is
billion.
9,000 million, or $9 billion of surplus generated by this market. Now, I was going to show an externality, but we don't actually have that much time left. There's only 20 minutes, and I want us to make sure to get to Professor Jose's
You're
tariff.
not getting away with it.
And the reason why is that I'm in the market for a washing machine.
20 speed.
I'm in the market for a washing machine, and I'm going to have to pay a higher price now because we have, in the United States today, imposed tariffs on washing machines.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to start with some house cleaning first, so that I have a clean board.
You help?
No, I should be able to get it, thanks. So what I'm going to do is as you know that there's been, or you may not know that there's been tariffs imposed on washing machines. So I'm going to do a quick analysis of the impact of tariffs on a market in which the home market is competitive. All right, so let's start out with some numbers. So here's the vertical axis, the price of washing machines. Here's the quantity of washing machines. Let's see if that, can you see it? It's not working too well.
Because I think you got
It's too wet.
it's got the,
Is it too wet?
it is, I think it'll be, let's see, it's okay, it'll evaporate. but
Okay, so here's the supply curve. There's the demand curve. And if you recall in Kara's example, there was no trade, so the price of the equilibrium price of washing machines was $900. And I believe the equilibrium quantity of washing machines was 12. Now 12 or 12 million, but that's going to be the only similarity between her graph and mine. Okay, I'm going to use a different set of numbers. Okay, so let's assume that this is a competitive market. The United States imports washing machines, but it doesn't have, it's not a big country in international trade. I'm going to assume it's a small country in international trade. And what that means is that it can't influence the world price of washing machines. And that's just I'm just making that assumption to simplify the analysis. We could take it into account in a more complex analysis, but this will give you an idea of the implications of a tariff. Right? So let's assume that the price of a tariff, excuse me, the world price of washing machines, which is represented by a horizontal line like that. Here's the price, and I'm going to put a little star right here, and this is washing machines, and that's the world price of washing machines, and that price happens to be $600. And so what that means is the United States U.S. consumers can purchase as much as they want washing machines. It doesn't matter what the quantity, but they'll always pay the same price per unit. All right, at that price, let's say that the quantity demanded is 16. Kara had 18, but it works better for me this way. This is going to be the quantity supplied by domestic producers, U.S. manufacturers of washing machines. That's going to be 6, right? And so that's what the market looks like in equilibrium before the tariff. When the tariff is imposed, what happens is that, of course, the internal price is going to go up. And since it's a small country, it's going to go up by the amount of the tariff. Let's assume that the tariff is $200. So the price will be going up by $200. That's the amount of the tariff. So to draw that in, I'll draw a horizontal line like this, and it'll be different from the other horizontal line simply by the amount of the tariff, the $200 tariff. Okay, so here we have the world price of the washing machines, and here this then will be the world price plus the $200 tariff. So that's going to be $800. Okay. Okay, so obviously raising the internal price of washing machines has an effect on consumers, on producers, and in this case, it's also going to have implications for the government because it's going to draw in some additional revenues that it did not have access to before. But let's look at producers. So what's going to happen is that the price within the market goes from 600 to 800. So they're going to move up. It's going to be profitable. They're going to move up their supply curve, okay, to the new price, to where the price is equal to the intersects the supply curve. And as a result, one implication of the tariff is that it's expanded the quantity supply. Production, domestic production, as a result of the tariff, and you can see it's a plus 4 more units. The higher price, though, has an impact on consumers. It causes them to cut back on their purchases, and the quantity demanded falls. And in this case, I'm going to assume it falls by 2 units to 14. Okay, so we have a reduction in quantity demanded of 2. Minus 2, right? Now, so the price increase, though, has implications for how it impacts consumers as well as producers. And let's translate that into, we can put a dollar measure of the impact on their well-being. So let's start with consumers. And what you can see from consumers is that before the tariff was in place, and I'm going to darken this line here, the demand curve, everything, here's the demand curve, and this is the line, the price line before the tariff. That area represents, as Dr. McDaniel said, is consumer surplus. It's the area above the price but below the demand curve. Now with the tariff, if you note, this is the new price right here that I'm making thicker, the line thicker. You can see that consumer surplus, which was this originally, has now shrunken or is now smaller by this amount here, by this long rectangular area in this triangle. I'm going to put, let's call this, to make things simple, we'll call this A, B, this rectangle C, and this D, right? Now, if we want to know the impact on consumers of the tariff, all we need to do is calculate the lost consumer surplus. And we can do that in steps. So let's say A is equal to, notice, it's made up of this rectangle here, which the height is 200, the $600 price without the tariff, the $800 price with the tariff. So the vertical distance is 200, and the horizontal distance is 6 units. So we have a portion of A, that's going to be $200 times the 6, plus there's also a triangle here associated with it. If the height of the triangle is $200.
Do you want to put a little dash line? There, yeah.
So the height of it is $200. The width of the triangle or the base is 4 units. So if you recall, the area of a triangle is 1/2 $200, the height, times the base, which is 4 units, right? So this works out to 1,200 plus 100 times 4, that's $1,600. So A is the dollar amount represented by area A is $1,600. Now we have area B. B is also a triangle, which is equal to the distance of the base is 4. So let's see, it's 1/2 times $200 times the base, which is 4, and that's equal to $400. Let's see if I've done that right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. And then there's this C area here, and that's a rectangle, and the distance up is 200 times the distance across, which is 4, 14 minus 10, which is 4, and that is equal to $800. And then finally, we have this triangle D. The distance up is also $200 times 1/2 times the distance across, which is 2. So that's $200. Okay, so to find out the impact on consumers or the amount of consumer surplus lost, we simply have to add these up, and what we get is $2,000 minus $3,000. So consumers lose $3,000 worth of consumer surplus as a consequence of the imposition of this tariff. Okay, so consumers lose, loss to consumers
I'm not happy about this.
of minus 3,000. Ah, you picked a bad time to buy a
I should
washing
have bought a
machine.
washing machine 2 years
You
ago.
should have bought it earlier. Okay, and so loss to consumer. What about producers? What happens to them? Well, if you recall from Dr. McDaniel, this is producer surplus. That is the price before the tariff and the area above the supply curve but below the price before the tariff is represented by this triangle here. this triangle has now expanded, this is the size of the triangle. This is the new area. And so it's expanded by area A, which is made up of this rectangle and that triangle. So producers, gain to producers is equal to area A, which we calculated over here as $600.
16.
Oh, excuse me, $1,600. Okay. Consumers lost 3,000, producers gained 1,600. Are there any more areas I need to take into account? Yeah. Remember, I mentioned that the government's now going to have additional revenue that it didn't have before. That's represented by area C. Because if you note, this difference right here, this distance here, which is the difference between what consumers are the number of washing machines that consumers are buying at a price of 800, which is 14, minus the number of washing machines that are being produced by or supplied by domestic producers, 10, that has to be what's being imported, what's coming from abroad. And so imports are equal to 4, which is the difference between 10 and 14. So this distance here is 4, okay? So on each one of those washing machines, the government is assessing a tariff of $200. So the amount of revenue that the government is collecting is $200 to height times 4 washing machines, that's 800. And that's what we calculated here. That is the additional tariff revenue that we calculated in this step here. So the government is collecting a plus $800. Okay, now so that's the impact on different groups on the government and different sort of entities within society. Loss of 3,000, gain of 2,400. Let's look at the difference here. That's let's see, 14, and that's $600 minus 600. Where did that go? Where did this 600 go? I mean, here part of the gain from part of the loss of consumers went to producers. The other part of the loss went to the government. But what happened to this? Well, that represents losses that disappear to the economy as a result, to this nation as a consequence of this tariff. And to understand those, I'll go really briefly. I know we're almost out of time. So if you look right here, let's look at B. Actually, the losses are represented by right here. Let's see. Here was the gain to producers. This one. Here's the gain to the government. So the losses have to do these, where I checked here, these checks. Area B and area D are with the sum of those are what we call the deadweight losses, the inefficiency introduced as a consequence of this tariff. So let's look at B. So to understand B, what's happening here is that this nation initially, if you think of the resources it was giving up or using in order to get these 4 units here that are now being produced domestically, it really only had to pay $600 per unit. That was its sacrifice in order to get each one of these washing machines that it imported from abroad. But now the tariff is inducing domestic producers to expand production, and the resources that they're using up are represented by the area underneath the supply curve. And so these units are being produced more inefficiently than what they could have been purchased from abroad. And that's called the production inefficiency loss. We're encouraging inefficient domestic production. It's a loss to the nation. Let's look over here at area D. It's a little bit different. This is kind of an opportunity lost for consumers. Initially, consumers were paying for these 2 units. They were paying this price of $600. But now what the tariff does is it is artificially, or it's inducing them to cut back on these purchases. And so they're sacrificing the fact that here is this triangle represents consumer surplus that disappears, that they had the opportunity of having when there was no tariff. But now that opportunity is gone. They've been discouraged from consuming this amount. They've cut back to 14. All of this is lost consumer surplus, and it's called the consumption efficiency loss. Okay, so let me summarize this. The tariff causes the price to rise in the small country case, the price to rise domestically. It causes consumers to cut back on their purchases of the product. It causes domestic producers to increase production, and it brings about revenue for the government. Now, in terms of the impact on producers and consumers, producers gain at the expense of consumers. Okay. Any questions?
Let's see, did anyone join us? No, we are live. All right, well, good luck with your finals. Post questions in the discussion forums if you have them, and have a great summer.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining.